Both engines died. At 28,000 feet. Complete silence. 100 people. No power. No airport in range. Just a rookie nurse in the back seat. Tired eyes. Cartoon scrubs. Old Crocs. Then her voice came on the radio. Nobody knew she could do that. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. It was a Friday. July 18, 2013. 4:23 p.m. Miami International Airport. Outside the terminal windows, the sky was doing what it always did in South Florida in July. It was angry. Dark clouds moved fast over the city, pushing sheets of rain against the glass. Lightning cracked somewhere over the bay. The kind of afternoon that made people look up from their phones and say, "Is our flight still going?" Inside Terminal D, the air conditioning was running cold and hard, the way it always did in Florida summer. People walked through the concourse in beach clothes, their skin red and salty from days at the water. Families dragged heavy bags. Business people in wrinkled suits checked their watches. Kids cried. Old couples held hands and looked at the departures board. Everyone was checking weather apps. Everyone was asking the same question, will we get out tonight? At gate D17, the boarding had just started for JetBlue Flight 477 to Boston. It was a popular route. Miami to Boston. South Florida to New England. The aircraft was an Embraer E190, a slim, narrow-body regional jet built for exactly this kind of hop. 100 seats. 2 engines. A strong little plane that flew this route every single day without any trouble at all. The boarding line moved slowly. Gate agents called zones. People dragged carry-on bags down the jet bridge. And among the tired faces moving through the door and into the cabin, one woman was particularly easy to miss. She was young. Maybe early 20s. Medium height, around 5'5". Soft build. Pale skin that did not match the Miami sunshine outside. She had a round, pleasant face, brown eyes behind simple wire-rimmed glasses, and light brown hair that had been pulled into a messy bun at some point in the morning. Now half of it had escaped. Little strands flew around her face and she did not seem to care. She was wearing navy blue scrubs with tiny cartoon stethoscopes printed all over them. The kind of scrubs you buy online in a pack of 3. She had a faded gray cardigan over them, the sleeves pushed up, the pockets stretched from carrying things. On her feet were white Crocs. The kind nurses wear after long shifts because your feet stop caring about style and start demanding comfort. She was carrying 2 bags. One was a canvas tote covered in small pins. Nurses call the shots. I save lives, what's your superpower? Caffeine and compassion. The other bag was a small insulated lunch bag, the kind you use to carry food to work. It probably had her dinner inside. Or maybe leftovers she had grabbed from the hospital break room and had not eaten yet. She moved through the boarding line the way tired people move. Not slow exactly. But not fast either. The way your body moves when your brain is only half awake. She found her seat, 7C, aisle seat on the left side, and sat down with a long, slow breath out. Not quite a sigh. More like someone releasing pressure they had been carrying all day. She kicked off her Crocs immediately. Tucked them under the seat. Pulled her phone out and typed a quick message to someone. Her brother, probably. Or her mother. Something short, like, I made it, boarding now. Then she held the phone in her lap and stared at the seat back in front of her with the blank look of a person whose body has finally stopped moving and has no idea what to do now. She looked around the cabin slowly. The seats were filling up. A family with 3 small kids sat in the row behind her. 2 little boys were already fighting over the window seat. Their mother looked just as tired as Elena. A businessman in a blue suit sat across the aisle. He had already opened his laptop and was typing fast. An old man near the front was reading a newspaper. A teenage girl 2 rows back was listening to music with big headphones on her ears. Normal people. Going to normal places. Nobody scared. Nobody worried about anything except whether the food cart would reach them before the flight ended. Elena watched them all quietly. She did this sometimes. In the ER, you learn to watch people. You learn to read their faces. You learn to see who is really okay and who is not. It was a habit she could not turn off even when she was not at work. She closed her eyes. She tried to rest. The plane was still boarding. People were still walking past her. Someone bumped her shoulder with a bag and said sorry. She said no problem without opening her eyes. She was so tired. Her legs hurt. Her feet hurt. Her head felt heavy. 6 shifts. 72 hours of work in 1 week. She had seen 2 very bad cases on her last shift. A 4-year-old boy. A car accident. She did not want to think about it right now. She pushed it away to the back of her mind. That was another thing nurses learn to do. Push the hard things back. Deal with them later. Or never. That was her. Elena Vasquez. 24 years old. Easy to dismiss. Easy to forget the moment you looked away. You were sitting in 7D, the middle seat right next to her. You noticed her the way you notice someone you are about to spend 3 hours next to. You thought, young nurse, tired, probably worked a night shift, going to sleep the whole flight. You moved your elbow to the shared armrest, said a quick internal sorry, and went back to your phone. You had no idea who she was. You had no idea what she carried with her. Here is what you did not know about Elena Vasquez. She had not slept properly in 6 days. Not a full night. Not even close. She had worked 6 consecutive 12-hour shifts in the pediatric emergency room at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami. She was covering for 3 colleagues who had called in sick, because that is what nurses do. They cover. They absorb the extra weight because someone has to, and they have been trained to believe that stopping is not an option when children need help. For 11 months, Elena had been a pediatric emergency room nurse. 11 months since graduation. Which made her, technically, still a rookie. In nursing, they say you are not fully experienced until you have at least 2 years under your belt. Elena had less than 1. But in those 11 months she had seen things that most people never see in a lifetime. Car accident victims who were 7 years old. Children with gunshot wounds. Drownings. Medical emergencies that arrived at the ER at 2 a.m. and required everything she had. Every piece of knowledge. Every calm breath she could manage. She had chosen this specialty on purpose. Pediatric trauma. The hardest place in the hospital to work. She had chosen it because she wanted to be where she was needed most. Her nurse manager, a sturdy woman named Sandra with 20 years of experience and zero tolerance for martyrdom, had finally put her foot down 2 days ago. Elena. You are going to your brother's wedding. You are getting on that plane. You are not coming back until Monday. If I see you in this building before then I will personally drive you back to the airport. So here she was. On the plane. Going to Boston for Danny's wedding. She was the maid of honor. She had helped plan the rehearsal dinner from the break room of the ER, sending emails between patients. She had ordered flowers online at midnight. She had written a speech that she had not fully finished yet and had saved in the Notes app of her phone. She almost did not come. She had told Danny twice that she might not make it. He had called her and said quietly, Elena. Please. And that was enough. So she came. But here is the part you did not know. Here is the thing that made Elena Vasquez different from every other tired 24-year-old nurse on that plane. Elena Vasquez had a commercial pilot license. She had earned it at age 22. She had 580 total hours of flying time. She had a private pilot certificate, an instrument rating, and a commercial certificate. She had earned all of it by saving every spare dollar and spending every day off at flight schools around South Florida. She had flown in rain and in clear skies and at night and through instrument conditions. She knew how to navigate. She knew emergency procedures. She knew how to read a sectional chart and talk to air traffic control and calculate fuel consumption and plan an approach. For the past 2 years she had been working part-time as a traffic reporter. 3 mornings a week, before her hospital shifts, she would drive to a small airfield in Opelika, climb into a rented Cessna 172, take off before dawn, and fly low over the highways of South Florida and Georgia reporting traffic conditions to a local radio station. She had done this so many times that she knew the roads and rivers and small towns and airfields below as well as she knew the layout of her own apartment. She had not flown in 4 months. Working full-time trauma nursing left no time. She felt guilty about that. She missed it every day. Why did she learn to fly in the first place? Her father. Captain Roberto Vasquez had been a commercial airline pilot for 23 years. He flew Boeing 737s for American Airlines. He had taken Elena to the airport when she was small and held her hand at the gate and pointed at the aircraft and said, "See that? I fly that." She had looked at the enormous silver plane and thought her father was the most important man in the world. He died 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and terrible. Elena was 19. She sat next to him at the hospital, the same kind of hospital she now worked in, and held his hand and listened to his breathing slow down. Before he died he asked her to come close. He was weak and the words cost him something. He said, "Take care of people. And never stop flying." She had done both. She became a nurse to take care of people. She learned to fly to never stop flying. She had used the life insurance money her father left, the money her mother had told her to save for something important, to pay for flight school. Her mother had not been angry. She had cried and said, he would have wanted that. Being in the air was the only place Elena still felt her father clearly. The grief that followed her everywhere on the ground went quiet when she was in the cockpit. When the wheels left the runway, something in her chest loosened. She felt him there in the seat next to her even when no one was. But today she was a passenger. Not a pilot. Sitting in 7C in her cartoon scrubs with her Crocs under the seat. And that felt different. This was the first time since her father died that she had flown as a passenger on a commercial airline. All her flying since then had been in small planes where she was pilot in command. In control. Now she was sitting in the back, strapped in, waiting for someone else to fly her somewhere. She was pressing her fingers together in her lap. She was looking at the window where the rain was still running in streaks. And quietly, without making any noise at all, she was trying not to cry. She remembered the last time she had been on a big commercial plane. She was 14 years old. Her father was flying that day. American Airlines. Miami to New York. He had arranged for her and her mother to sit in first class as a treat. Before the flight he had come out of the cockpit in his uniform, dark blue jacket, for gold stripes on the sleeve, captain's hat under his arm, and he had winked at her. She had felt so proud. So incredibly proud. She had told every single person sitting near her. "That's my dad. He's the captain. He flies this plane." Some people smiled politely. Some people did not care. She did not care that they did not care. Her dad was the captain and that was the best thing in the world. During the flight he had called her up to the cockpit. She stood between the 2 seats and looked at all the buttons and screens and dials. It felt like a spaceship. He had pointed at things and named them one by one. Altimeter. Airspeed. Heading. Vertical speed. She repeated every word back to him. He nodded each time like she had said something very important. On the way back to her seat he had said quietly, just to her, "One day you will understand all of this. You are going to be good at this." She had become a nurse. Not a pilot. But she had also become a pilot. Both. Just like he always said she would be. Now she was on a plane again. Not as a pilot. As a passenger. And he was not here. He had been gone for 5 years and she still missed him every single day. Some days more than others. Today was one of the more days. She wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand. She put her glasses back on. She took a slow breath. The plane was moving now. Pushing back from the gate. The engines were starting. That familiar low hum that meant the aircraft was waking up. She was thinking about all the times her father had taken her to the cockpit during his flights. When she was little, before September 11th changed the rules, pilots were allowed to invite family into the cockpit during flight. She remembered standing between his seat and the first officer's seat, her small hands on the back of his chair, watching the instruments glow in the dark. He would name things for her. Altimeter. Airspeed indicator. Vertical speed. He would say the words slowly and she would repeat them. She carried all of that with her now. She did not know yet what she was about to need it for. The flight pushed back from gate D-17 at 4:51 p.m. The rain had eased enough for operations to continue. Captain Thomas Riley taxied out with calm efficiency. He was 44 years old, had 14,000 hours of flying time, and had been with JetBlue for 16 years. He was the kind of pilot passengers never think about because nothing bad ever happens. He was steady and experienced and good at his job in the invisible way that good pilots always are. First Officer Megan Clark was 32. She had 6,200 hours. She had flown C-130 cargo aircraft in the Air Force before transitioning to commercial aviation. She was precise and quick and had the calm voice that comes from years of instrument flying in difficult conditions. Together they had handled plenty of difficult situations. Hydraulic warnings. Engine vibrations. Weather diversions. The small emergencies that pilots train for constantly and handle without passengers ever knowing. They had never handled this. JetBlue 477 climbed normally through the afternoon thunderstorm layer and broke into clear air above 15,000 feet. The passengers felt the familiar smoothing out as the turbulence faded. People took off their seatbelts. Phones came out for games and movies. The flight attendants began the drink service. In seat 7C, Elena had her head against the window. Her eyes were closed. She was not fully asleep. She was in that place between sleep and waking where your body is still but your mind is still turning slowly. She was thinking about Danny's wedding. About the speech she had not finished. About whether she had packed the right shoes. She was almost asleep when the airplane leveled off at 28,000 feet, somewhere over northern Georgia. The time was 5:10 p.m. The Canada geese were flying in a loose formation at an altitude where they should not have been. In normal years, Canada geese migrate at low altitudes. Below 3,000 feet, usually. But 2013 had been an unusual year for migration patterns. Climate change was doing things to the natural calendar that biologists and meteorologists were still trying to document. These birds were at 28,000 feet. No one knew exactly why. Maybe they had been caught in an updraft. Maybe something about the atmosphere that day had pushed them higher than they should have gone. The Embraer E-190 flew into the middle of the flock at 430 knots. Both engines ingested multiple large birds almost simultaneously. The left engine went first. There was a sound, passengers later described it as an explosion, a loud bang like a cannon, and the aircraft lurched. Then the right engine. Another bang. More lurching. The aircraft shuddered. In the cockpit, every warning light was on. Captain Riley and First Officer Clark began working through emergency procedures immediately. This was training. This was muscle memory. Left engine restart checklist. Fuel. Ignition. Starter. Nothing. Right engine restart checklist. Fuel. Ignition. Starter. Nothing. Both turbines had been destroyed by the combination of multiple bird impacts. The blades that should have been spinning inside were shredded metal. There was no restarting them. There was nothing to restart. The aircraft was now a 45-ton glider. Think about that for a moment. A plane with no engines. No power. No thrust. Just a heavy metal tube with wings, falling slowly through the sky. Like a very big paper airplane. Except this paper airplane had 100 real people inside it. People with families. People with children waiting at home. People who had plans for the weekend. People who had no idea that 2 minutes ago everything changed. The pilots had about 18 minutes. After that the plane would reach the ground. One way or another. Riley looked at Clark. She looked at him. In that half-second of eye contact they both understood what they were dealing with. Not a single engine failure, which was manageable. Not a partial failure. Both engines. Zero thrust. They were in an airplane that was now gliding toward the Georgia farmland below. Clark got on the radio to Atlanta Center immediately. Atlanta Center, JetBlue 477 declaring emergency. Dual engine failure, both engines destroyed by bird strike. We are presently in a glide, altitude 28,000 feet descending. Requesting emergency vectors, requesting nearest suitable airport. Atlanta Center responded within seconds. Professional. Calm. JetBlue 477, radar contact, squawk 7700. Nearest suitable airport Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International, 120 miles northwest your position. Riley was already doing the math in his head. An E-190 in a clean glide from 28,000 feet can cover roughly 90 miles before it reaches ground level. 120 miles to Atlanta. He did the numbers twice because he wanted them to be wrong. They were not wrong. They could not reach Atlanta. He keyed his intercom to the cabin. He had to tell them. He had trained for this moment, but training does not fully prepare you for the reality of 100 people behind you who are about to hear the worst news of their lives. His voice was steady. Pilots train to keep their voices steady. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Riley. We have experienced dual engine failure caused by a bird strike. Both engines are offline and cannot be restarted. We are currently gliding. We will not be able to reach a major airport. We are going to have to make an emergency landing at a smaller airfield. I need everyone to remain calm and follow all crew instructions immediately. This is extremely serious. We will do everything we can. The cabin erupted. Not violence. Not stampeding. But the sound of 100 people discovering that they might die in the next 20 minutes. People grabbed the hands of strangers sitting next to them. A woman near the back screamed and then put her hand over her own mouth. Children started crying, picking up the terror from the adults around them. Men with their eyes wide open started dialing phones with shaking fingers. A businessman in row 12 bowed his head and his lips moved silently. The 3 flight attendants, Jessica Park in the forward galley, and 2 younger crew members named Aisha and Carlos in the middle and rear of the cabin, began moving immediately. Jessica was 38 years old and had 13 years with JetBlue. She was good at her job. She loved her job. Right now she was terrified and doing her job anyway. Everyone listen to me. Stay in your seats. Keep your seatbelts on. We are going to walk you through emergency procedures right now. Listen to my voice. Only my voice. In seat 7C, Elena Vasquez woke up. Not slowly. Not the gradual waking of someone stirring from normal sleep. She came awake hard and fast, the way trauma nurses come awake, body already alert, mind already sorting, the instinct to assess and act running before conscious thought had fully assembled itself. She heard the captain's words again in her head. Both engines offline. Cannot be restarted. Cannot reach a major airport. Her nursing training engaged first. Scan the environment. Triage. Who needs help? How do you help them? She looked around the cabin. People crying. People hyperventilating. She started to unbuckle. She was going to walk the aisle and help the flight attendants keep people calm. That was what nurses did in emergencies. They moved toward the crisis. Then she heard Jessica Park's voice, slightly above the passenger noise, speaking to flight attendant Aisha near the forward bulkhead. He says there's nothing in range. The captain says he's looking, but the small strips down there aren't long enough for us. He says he doesn't know if we can survive a field landing. Elena stopped. She stood half out of her seat and she stopped. She heard those words in a specific way. Not the way a frightened passenger hears them. The way a pilot hears them. No airport in range. Small strips not long enough. Doesn't know the terrain. The pilots did not know where to go. Her brain made a turn. A hard, fast turn. She was no longer thinking like a nurse. She was thinking like her father's daughter. She was thinking like someone who had spent 3 mornings a week for 2 years flying low over this exact part of Georgia in a small airplane, watching the ground below, learning every river and ridge and road and runway between Miami and the Carolina border. She knew this ground. She had flown over it hundreds of times. She knew where the airports were. Elena moved fast. She stepped out of her seat, past you in 7D, past the man in 7B who was praying with his eyes closed. She walked forward with purpose. Not running. Running in a cabin creates panic and panic kills people. She walked with the deliberate, steady speed of someone who has a place to be and a reason to get there. Jessica Park saw her coming and put out a hand. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. My name is Elena Vasquez." Her voice was shaking. Just a little. She gripped it with both hands the way she gripped her voice in the ER when a child came in and she needed the child to hear her and not hear the fear. "I am a commercial pilot. I have 580 hours. I fly traffic reporting routes for a radio station out of Opelika 3 mornings a week. My routes cover Georgia and northern Florida. I know this terrain below us. I know the airports. I know every possible landing site within 100 miles of where we are right now." She stopped and looked Jessica directly in the eyes. "Your pilots need navigation help. They need someone who knows where safe landing options are below them right now. I can help them. I need to talk to them. Please." Jessica stared at her. This woman was 24 years old. She was wearing scrubs with cartoon stethoscopes on them. She had Crocs on her feet and a messy bun in her hair, and she looked like she had not slept since Tuesday. She looked like a babysitter. She looked like someone's little sister. She also looked completely serious. Jessica Park had 13 years of experience. She had seen emergencies before. She had seen passengers panic and passengers freeze and passengers do brave things. She had learned to read people quickly. She read Elena Vasquez in 5 seconds. She picked up the intercom phone and pressed the cockpit call button. "Captain Riley. I have a passenger up here. She says she's a commercial pilot. 580 hours. Says she flies traffic routes over Georgia and knows the terrain below us. She says she can help you find a landing site." A pause. 1 second. 2. "Send her up. Right now." The cockpit door opened. Elena stepped in. Captain Riley turned his head. He saw a tired young woman in nurse scrubs who looked barely old enough to be out of college. His eyes went to the scrubs. To the Crocs. To the messy hair. He started to form a doubt. Elena spoke before the doubt could grow. "Captain Riley, I'm Elena Vasquez. Commercial certificate, 580 hours, instrument rated. I fly a Cessna 172 out of Opelika for WMIA radio, traffic reporting. My route is Miami to Macon 3 times a week, every week, for 2 years. I know what's below us." She was already looking at the instruments. Altitude. Heading. Airspeed. She was reading the cockpit the way she had been taught to read it, the way her father had named the instruments for her one by one when she was small enough to stand between his seat and the first officer's seat. Riley studied her for one more second. Then he turned back to the windshield. There was no time for prolonged evaluation. There was no time for anything except finding a place to land. We're through 22,000 feet descending. Glide range approximately 90 miles from where we started, we've used some of that. Nearest suitable is Atlanta International at 120 miles, which we cannot make. I've got small rural strips below me but nothing the E-190 can use, runways are too short. I need something with at least 5,000 feet of usable runway and preferably more. Elena was already there. She closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. She was flying her traffic route in her mind. She was seeing the ground from 2,000 feet the way she saw it 3 mornings a week. She was seeing the rivers and the highways and the small towns. She was seeing the airfields. She opened her eyes. Robins Air Force Base. Warner Robins, Georgia. It's 85 miles southeast of our current position. Riley looked at Clark. "I know that name," Clark said. "Military installation. I fly past it every single morning," Elena said. "It handles C-130 Hercules and C-5 Galaxy aircraft. The main runway is 12,000 feet long. 12,000 feet. You need 5,000 minimum for the E-190 and you'll have 12,000. It is absolutely within our glide range. Vector heading 145 degrees from here. I have flown this approach 100 times from above. I know the terrain, I know the ridge lines, I know what the ground looks like coming in from the northwest." Riley and Clark looked at each other. The math worked. 85 miles. They had roughly 90 miles of glide remaining. It was close. It was very close. But it was possible. And it was the only option they had. Atlanta Center, JetBlue 477. "We have a passenger on board, commercial pilot, 580 hours, who knows this area. She's recommending Robins Air Force Base, Warner Robins, Georgia, heading 145 degrees, approximately 85 miles. Can you confirm and request emergency clearance?" Atlanta Center came back in 15 seconds. JetBlue 477, Robins AFB on your 145 at 83 miles, runway 5 to 23 length 12,000 feet. Robins approach is being notified now. Emergency services are being activated. Continue present heading, will refine vectors as needed. Riley keyed the intercom. "Sit in the jump seat. Buckle in. If you know this terrain I need your eyes for the whole approach." Elena sat in the small fold-down jump seat on the side of the cockpit. She buckled the harness. Her hands were shaking but she made them still. Outside the windshield, 22,000 feet below, Georgia spread out in every direction. Green and wide and mostly flat with patches of dark forest and the silver lines of rivers running through it. She knew it. She knew every piece of it. They had approximately 16 minutes. In the cabin, Jessica Park and her crew were doing what they had trained for. Brace position instructions. How to hold the position. What to do on impact. Keep seatbelts tight. Remove glasses and sharp objects from pockets. Take off shoes with heels. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with controlled, practiced calm that most passengers could not feel but some could, and those passengers used it like a lifeline. In the cockpit, Elena was working. Coming through 20,000. What do you see below? She looked. Interstate 75 is below us to the left. That's the Flint River at your 2 o'clock. We are exactly where we should be. Robbins is ahead. Glide path? Clark asked. Elena did the numbers in her head. Altitude. Distance. Glide ratio. Her father had made her do these calculations 1,000 times. First on paper, then in her head, then in the air until they were automatic. You are slightly high. Which is good. You have margin. Don't steepen yet. Let the aircraft fly the glide naturally. Riley was quiet and focused. He had his hands on the controls and he was flying. Just flying. The way you fly when everything else falls away and it is just you and the aircraft and the ground below. 15,000 feet. I see the town of Kathleen below us. Warner Robins city limits are 5 miles ahead. Robins AFB is on the south side of the city. You will see a long runway oriented northwest to southeast. You want runway 23, the southeast heading, to land into the prevailing winds. I can see from our track that will line up well. Confirm runway length. 12,000 feet. You will not run out of runway. Hydraulics? Clark asked Riley. Minimal. We have partial flight controls. Enough to steer. Not much to spare. Landing gear. Gravity extension. It'll drop. Won't lock prettily but it'll lock. Flaps. Limited. Maybe 10 degrees. Not full. Elena heard this and processed it. Limited flaps meant they would land faster than normal. Which meant they needed more runway. Which was exactly why she had recommended a 12,000-foot military runway instead of a 5,000-foot regional strip. She had known this without being told because she understood what no flaps meant for approach speed. Her father had taught her that. 10,000 feet. I can see the airfield. Riley scanned ahead. I don't see it. Slightly right of your nose. See the large industrial complex? 2 miles south of that. The long straight line, that's the runway. I have it, Clark said. I have the field. Robins approach, JetBlue 477, we have the field in sight, Riley transmitted. JetBlue 477, you are cleared emergency approach runway 23, all equipment standing by. Wind 220 at 12. You are number 1. Runway is yours. Number 1. The entire base was stopping for them. 8,000 feet. Elena was watching the angle. She was watching the way the runway sat in her windshield view. She had done this before. Not in an airliner, never in an airliner, but she understood approach angles the way she understood blood pressure readings. Pattern recognition. Data that told a story. Your angle looks right. Maybe very slightly high still. Do not steepen. You want to arrive at the runway threshold with some altitude remaining. Ridge line? Clark asked, remembering Elena had mentioned it earlier. Past it. You cleared the ridge 3 minutes ago. Terrain is flat from here to the runway. 6,000 feet. The runway was getting bigger in the windshield now. It was enormous. She had seen it from the air 100 times at 2,000 feet, a long gray stripe through the Georgia landscape, but seeing it now as a destination, as the only possible destination, it looked like the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Gear down, Riley called. The thud and groan of the landing gear dropping on gravity. 3 thuds. 3 greens. Locked. Gear down and locked. 4,000 feet. You're lined up well. Runway centerline is directly ahead. Your speed looks high, that's correct for limited flaps. Don't try to slow down, you need that energy. Let it fly. Elena was not supposed to be here. She was supposed to be asleep in seat 7C on her way to her brother's wedding. She was supposed to be thinking about the maid of honor speech she had not finished. She was 24 years old and she was wearing cartoon scrubs and she was in a military jet's cockpit guiding a powerless airliner to a runway that she knew from flying over it in a tiny Cessna at dawn. She thought of her father for one clear second. Take care of people. Never stop flying. Dad. I'm doing both. Right now. Both at once. 2,000 feet. Looking good, Captain. Runway ahead. 1,500 feet. Threshold in sight. Riley was totally focused. His hands were steady on the yoke. He was a good pilot. Elena understood this in the way you understand someone's competence when you watch them work. He was calm and precise and he was going to land this plane. 1,000 feet. 500 feet. You're on centerline. Threshold coming up. 200 feet. 100 feet. The runway threshold passed under them. Riley pulled back slightly on the yoke to flare the aircraft, to raise the nose just before touchdown to slow the descent. The aircraft responded sluggishly with limited hydraulics and limited flaps, but it responded. The nose came up. The main gear touched the runway. It was not gentle. It was hard and fast, the way a dead-stick landing always is, the way you land when you have no go-around option if it goes wrong. The aircraft bounced once, came back down, stayed down. The nose gear came down a moment later. The aircraft was rolling. Riley stood on the brakes. Clark deployed the spoilers with what hydraulic pressure they had left. The aircraft decelerated. The numbers on the runway countdown signs flashed past. 10,000 feet remaining. 8,000, 6,000. 4,000. The aircraft slowed. And stopped. Runway 23 at Robins Air Force Base, Warner Robins, Georgia. All 100 passengers. 2 pilots. 3 flight attendants. 1 rookie nurse in cartoon scrubs. All alive. The aircraft sat motionless on the runway with emergency vehicles surrounding it within 60 seconds, fire trucks and ambulances and Air Force personnel converging from every direction. For a moment no one in the cockpit moved. Riley had both hands on the yoke and he slowly let go of it. Clark exhaled in one long steady breath. Outside, the Georgia evening light was coming through the windshield and the emergency lights were flashing red and white on the runway around them. Elena sat in the jump seat with her hands in her lap. She was shaking. Not a little. Her whole body was shaking the way it shook sometimes after a particularly bad shift in the ER, after the adrenaline stopped and the reality caught up. She had learned not to fight it. You let it happen and it passes. The radio crackled. JetBlue 477, outstanding emergency landing. All services standing by. You are clear to begin evacuation at your discretion. One question from Tower, who was providing the local navigation assistance during your approach? That terrain knowledge was critical. Riley looked at Elena. He looked at the cartoon stethoscopes on her scrubs. He looked at the Crocs on her feet. He looked at the tears running down her face and the way she was gripping her own knees to stop her hands from shaking. He keyed the radio. Tower, that navigation assistance was provided by a passenger. Commercial pilot who flies traffic reporting routes locally. She knew this terrain and she guided us to your runway. She is the reason we made it here. Her name is Elena Vasquez. The tower was quiet for a moment. Understood, JetBlue 477. Please extend our compliments to Ms. Vasquez. Welcome to Robins Air Force Base. Riley turned to look at her fully. Are you okay? Elena wiped her face with the sleeve of her cardigan. She laughed, a little, even though she was still crying. I'm a pediatric ER nurse, she said. I'm always okay. Eventually. How old are you? 24. Riley absorbed that. He was 44 years old with 14,000 hours and he had just been helped by a 24-year-old in cartoon scrubs. And your actual job? Not pilot. Your primary job. Elena looked at him. I'm a nurse. Pediatric trauma. Jackson Memorial in Miami. I got my pilot license with my father's life insurance money. He was a commercial pilot. American Airlines. He flew 737s for 23 years. She paused. The shaking was slowing. He died 5 years ago. Before he died he made me promise 2 things. Take care of people, and never stop flying. So I became a nurse. And I learned to fly. Both. She looked at the windshield. Outside, the Georgia evening was orange and pink. He would be so proud right now. Riley looked at her for a long moment. He should be, he said simply. The passengers were evacuated via emergency slides. No injuries. A few bruises. A lot of tears. A lot of people sitting on the tarmac of Robbins AFB who had never expected to see a military airfield in Georgia and were very grateful to see anything at all. Elena came down the jet bridge last, after the pilots, and walked into the waiting area that the Air Force had set up for them. People were wrapped in emergency blankets. A chaplain was moving through the group. Air Force medics were checking on passengers. Television news crews were outside the perimeter, their cameras trained on the aircraft sitting alone on the runway. Elena stood at the door and looked at the people in that room. She knew this feeling. She had seen it in the ER many times. The feeling after a very bad thing. When it is over and people are safe but their bodies have not understood that yet. Their hands were still shaking. Their eyes were still wide. Some people were on their phones talking very fast. Some people were just sitting and staring at nothing. A young man was sitting on the floor against the wall with his face in his hands. He was not crying. He was just sitting there. Elena walked over to him. She sat down next to him on the floor. She did not say anything. She just sat there beside him. After 2 minutes he looked up. He said, I have a baby girl. She is 3 months old. I kept thinking about her the whole time. Elena said, she is going to see her dad tonight. He nodded slowly. He started crying then. But it was okay. It was the right kind of crying. The kind that means you are safe now. That was what nurses did. Not just medical things. Not just emergency things. They sat on floors next to strangers and made them feel less alone. Elena did not think about this consciously. She just did it. Because it was who she was. A woman near the door looked up when Elena walked in. She was maybe 60 years old, had been sitting in row 12, and had been praying through the whole approach. She stood up when she saw Elena. You're the one, she said. You're the nurse. Elena stopped. One of the flight attendants told us. She said there was a nurse on board who was also a pilot and she went up to the cockpit to help. Elena did not know what to say to that. The woman crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around Elena. She did not say anything else. She just held on. And around them, others were watching, and some of them were nodding. Elena stood in the middle of the room in her cartoon stethoscope scrubs with her Crocs on her feet and her messy bun completely destroyed by the most intense 20 minutes of her life, and she let someone hug her, and she thought about Danny's wedding which was tomorrow, and about the speech she still had not finished, and about her father. Her phone had 47 missed calls. Danny was among them. She called him first. Elena. Elena, are you okay? It's on the news. What happened? Are you? I'm fine, she said. I'm in Georgia. I'm fine. Tell me about the rehearsal dinner. Elena. It's on the news. They're saying a nurse helped land the plane. She was quiet for a second. I had a pilot license, Danny. You knew that. I knew you had a license. I didn't know you were going to use it to land a broken airplane. It wasn't broken. It just didn't have engines. There was a silence on the line. Then Danny laughed. A long, almost hysterical laugh. Dad would be. I know, she said. I know he would. The media story broke that night, and by the next morning it was everywhere. Rookie nurse's secret pilot license saves 100 lives over Georgia. She was just a passenger. Then both engines died. How a 24-year-old pediatric nurse in Crocs guided an airliner to safety. The story spread the way stories spread when they hit something true in people. Something about Elena Vasquez, her age, her scrubs, her Crocs, the fact that she had been going to a wedding, the dead father who had been a pilot, the promise she had kept, connected with something people recognized. She was not a hero in the Hollywood sense. She was a tired nurse who happened to know the right thing at the right time. That felt like something. Elena made it to Boston. An Air Force transport flew her and the other passengers to Logan Airport the following morning. She arrived at the wedding venue 4 hours before the ceremony with her speech still in her phone, her scrubs in a carry-on bag, and a story she had not yet fully processed. At the rehearsal brunch, Danny stood next to her at the coffee station and put his arm around her shoulders. Are you really okay? I keep asking myself that, she said. And I think the answer is yes. I was scared. But I knew what to do. And I did it. Because of Dad. Because of Dad and because of nursing school, she said. Both of them. At the same time. 3 days later, in Boston, a reporter found her. She was standing outside the wedding venue in a blue dress, finally out of scrubs, finally having slept a full night. She looked different without the exhaustion and the emergency. She looked like a young woman in her 20s who had just been to a beautiful wedding. The reporter was from one of the national networks. She had been tracking Elena since the story broke. Ms. Vasquez. Can I ask you a few questions? Elena looked at the microphone. She thought about saying no. She thought about going back inside to find Danny and his new wife and eat more wedding cake. Then she thought about what her father would want her to say. She said yes. How did you know what to do? In that moment. When both engines were gone and the pilots didn't know the terrain. What made you stand up and walk to the front of that plane? Elena thought for a moment. Nurses manage crisis situations every single day. We see people in the worst moments of their lives and we have to stay calm. We have to assess the situation. We have to triage, figure out what is most critical and address it first. We have to execute the right interventions under pressure, quickly, with incomplete information, and we cannot panic. That is literally what nursing is. That is the job. She paused. Today I just did it in a cockpit instead of an emergency room. The skills were the same. Stay calm. Use your knowledge. Help people. Don't panic. My father taught me to fly. Nursing taught me to handle emergencies. Today both of those things came together. That's all. Do you consider yourself a hero? She shook her head. I'm a nurse who happened to know the terrain. Any pilot would have done the same if they knew the area. Captain Riley landed that plane. First Officer Clark flew that plane. I just pointed them in the right direction. That's all I did. What do you think your father would say? Elena was quiet for a moment. He would say, good girl. Both promises kept. She looked at the reporter one more time and then she excused herself and went back to Danny's wedding. When Elena returned to Jackson Memorial Hospital the following Monday, Sandra, her nurse manager, was waiting for her at the door to the pediatric unit. I told you to take 3 days off, Sandra said. I did not tell you to save 100 lives while you were at it. It sort of happened, Elena said. Also, Sandra added, and her voice was different now, softer, that was the bravest thing I've ever heard of. And I've been a nurse for 20 years. Elena put on her scrubs, the cartoon stethoscope ones, because they were her favorite, and went back to work. JetBlue reached out 2 weeks later. A representative flew to Miami to meet Elena in person. They sat in a coffee shop near the hospital and the representative asked what Elena wanted. Anything within reason. It was an open question. Elena had thought about this. I don't want to be a commercial pilot, she said. I love nursing. I love the ER. I love the kids. I don't want to leave that. Okay. But I want to keep flying. And I think, she stopped. Started again. I think healthcare workers who also know aviation are genuinely valuable. What happened on that plane happened because I knew both things. Nursing gave me the ability to stay calm and triage the situation. Flying gave me the specific knowledge I needed. What if more healthcare workers had both? The JetBlue representative leaned forward. What are you suggesting? I want to teach. I want to be a flight instructor. Part-time. I want to work at a flight school that specifically recruits nurses and paramedics and EMTs and doctors and offers them a track to get their pilot licenses. People who are already trained for emergencies. People who already understand high-pressure decision-making. Teach them to fly and you create something very valuable, people who can handle any emergency, in any environment. She looked at the representative. Help me build that. I'll keep nursing full-time. I'll instruct part-time on my days off. Honor my dad's legacy that way. The JetBlue representative was quiet for a moment. That is, he said slowly, a genuinely excellent idea. It was July again. 2018, 5 years since the day 2 engines died over Georgia. Elena Vasquez was 29 years old. She was still a pediatric emergency room nurse at Jackson Memorial Hospital, now senior staff, no longer a rookie. She had 2,000 hours of flying time. She had an instrument rating, a commercial certificate, and a certified flight instructor rating. She taught 3 afternoons a week at Opelika Flight Academy, which had, partly because of her and the program she had helped build, a full curriculum specifically designed for healthcare workers. The program was called the Roberto Vasquez Foundation Track. Named for her father. It had graduated 47 student pilots in 4 years. Nurses, paramedics, an emergency room physician, 2 flight medics, and a hospice nurse who had decided that learning to fly was the best gift she could give herself. Some of them had gone on to become commercial pilots. Most of them had stayed in healthcare and kept flying on the side, the way Elena did. All of them were better at their primary jobs because of what they had learned. Elena taught with the same calm she brought to the ER. She taught emergency procedures the way she ran a trauma code, methodically, thoroughly, with respect for what could go wrong. On the first day of every new student class, she told them the same thing. You already know how to do this. You already make critical decisions under pressure every day at work. You already manage fear, yours and other people's. You already triage. You already communicate clearly in emergencies. Flying is going to teach you the technical skills on top of that foundation. The foundation is already there. She paused and looked at them. You are healthcare workers. That means you are already built for this. Now we are going to teach you to fly. A journalist wrote a long piece about Elena in 2018, 5 years after the incident. At the end of the interview he asked her one final question. You could have made a different choice. After the landing. After the media. You could have gone and gotten your ATP, your airline transport pilot certificate. Become a commercial pilot. Your story was everywhere. Airlines would have hired you immediately. Why did you stay in nursing? Elena thought about it. Because that's where I'm needed, she said. In the ER. With the kids. But you still fly. I'll always fly. That's the promise I made my father. She looked out the window of the coffee shop. A small plane was crossing the sky above Miami, heading north. She watched it until it was gone. Both jobs are about bringing people home alive, she said quietly. My father flew airplanes and brought people home safely every day for 23 years. I work in a trauma ER and I try to bring children home to their parents every shift. Flying is just another version of the same thing. She turned back to the journalist. That's what he taught me. Before everything else. Before the instrument rating and the emergency procedures and the sectional charts. He taught me what the job was really about. She smiled. Bring them home. Always bring them home. Somewhere over Georgia, on a Friday afternoon in 2013, a tired young nurse in cartoon scrubs and Crocs sat in a cockpit jump seat and shook and cried and guided a powerless aircraft to a 12,000-foot runway. Her father had been a pilot. She had promised him she would take care of people. She had promised him she would never stop flying. On July 18, 2013, Elena Vasquez kept both promises at the same time. That is the whole story. That is all it ever was.